Can we start?
Yes, we can start.
Good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are. A warm welcome to the regional GCM talk on indicators for Asia and the Pacific. My name is Vanessa Steinmeier. I'm a Population Affairs Officer at the United Nations Economic Commission for Asia and the Pacific, also called ESCAP. ESCAP is co-chairing with IOM the Asia-Pacific Regional Network on Migration. I look forward to guiding you through the introduction of this GCM talk. As we all know, international migration is an important factor in the development of the Asia-Pacific region. Migrants make important contributions to the economic and social development in countries of origin and destination, but they are often not accounted for these contributions. Developing indicators is crucial to measure progress in implementation of the Global Compact on Migration, both globally and particularly in Asia and the Pacific. The primary goal of this present event is to keep member states and stakeholders well informed about the process of indicators development and its methodology, and also how the work stream has worked in developing the preliminary proposal for a limited set of indicators. In this regard, your contributions will be vital in refining the selection process, and your insights on the regional nuances will play a crucial role in achieving this goal. I'm very pleased to hear presentations today from the UN Network on Migration Secretariat, the co-leads of the workstream on indicators, IOM and UNDESA, who have played a pivotal role in the development of indicators. And also, it is a very special pleasure for me to have our keynote speakers from Tokiwa University, who I assure you is very well familiar with the region. We will also hear from ILO, a member of the workstream. Before I introduce all the speakers, it is now my pleasure to give the floor to Mrs. Amy Muad'Din, the Deputy Head of the United Nations Network on Migration Secretariat, to deliver welcoming remarks. Amy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Vanessa, and thank you also to ESCAP for moderating this event today. I won't take long, colleagues. I just wanted to welcome all to this regional consultation on indicators for measuring progress on the implementation of the GCM. This is part of a series of regional GCM talks that we're holding this week, and today, of course, we're focusing on Asia Pacific. We're also very pleased to see the unwavering commitment of member states and stakeholders in generating momentum for following up the IMRF's progress declaration. So today we're meeting to take stock of the progress made by the network's work stream, which responds to paragraph 70 of the progress declaration. More specifically, that encompasses a proposal for a limited set of indicators and a comprehensive strategy for improving disaggregated migration data, both as requested by member states in the progress declaration. So this gathering seeks to foster dialogue and collaboration amongst member states and stakeholders, delving into the indicators development process and methodology. We aim to facilitate meaningful discussions that will contribute to refining the proposal for a limited set of indicators. And we'll have more opportunities to do so, including through the global consultations later this year. And the resulting revised proposal of these limited set of indicators will help inform the Secretary General's report due next year in 2024. Now, the GCM itself, as we all know, is a comprehensive and essential framework aimed at addressing the complexities of global migration, fostering cooperation amongst nations, and upholding the rights and well-being of migrants. So incorporating indicators to gauge the GCM's implementation is a groundbreaking step towards enhancing transparency and advancing robust, timely, and reliable data on migration allowing comparison over time and across regions. The limited set of indicators to review the progress made in implementing the GCM holds promise for evidence-based decision-making and reporting. Implementing these indicators would enable member states to assess their progress in aligning with the GCM principles, identify areas for improvements, and foster a collective understanding of successes, gaps in capacity, and challenges. Nevertheless, it is vital to approach this process considering the diverse perspectives on migration across different regions, while acknowledging also each country's social and economic factors and capacities. And in this very challenging task, I would like to salute the exceptional dedication and hard work of the co-leads of this network workstream, UNDESA and IOM. Their unwavering commitment to inclusivity and creating spaces for collaboration and dialogue has driven meaningful progress in identifying the preliminary proposal for this limited set of indicators. Likewise, I would like to acknowledge the invaluable contributions of the workstream members and thank them for their constructive engagement. This workstream truly reflects the essence of our network community, which benefits from a wide breadth of technical experience and represents the diversity and collaborative spirit of our partnerships across the UN system and stakeholders. The preliminary proposal for a limited set of indicators builds on the wealth of indicators already available, including the SDG Global Indicator Framework. The proposal aims to create a more effective and coherent approach by leveraging existing efforts and knowledge. Many countries are already producing and collecting data to understand trends and the situation of migrants, their vulnerabilities, and how to improve their integration and well-being. By aligning GCM indicators with existing processes, countries can build upon existing data collection systems and reporting mechanisms, maximizing the impact of migration policies on sustainable development and promoting inclusive strategies that benefit both migrants and host communities. It also allows nations to work together, learn from one another, and build a more compassionate and cooperative approach to migration. Member states' involvement is vital in ensuring the relevance, measurability, and comparability of these indicators. Therefore, let me echo Vanessa's sentiments and encourage you for your active participation and insights and how regional context should be reflected in their selection. I encourage you to reflect and recognize unique challenges and opportunities specific to the Asia-Pacific region. Regional perspectives should also inform the choice of indicators to be included in the limited set, thus ensuring a more accurate and contextually relevant proposal that resonates with the global and regional landscapes. Let us seize this opportunity and work together constructively to ensure that the limited set of indicators is relevant for this region as well as other regions, that migrants are visible, and that the proposal meets the needs of decision makers for informed migration policies in the region and beyond. Thank you very much for your participation and your commitment to this significant process. Vanessa, thanks very much. Over back to you.
Thank you very much, Amy, for your welcome remarks. We will now hear from two experts that have been co-leading the activities of the workstream. They will provide an overview of the indicators development process and methodology. First, let's welcome Mrs. Irene Schöfberger, a data and research officer at IOM's Global Migration Data Analysis Center, or GMDAC. Mrs. Schöfberger has more than 10 years of experience in conducting analysis and research on migration, development trends, and policies. Today's presentation will provide us with valuable insights into the development process and methodology of the indicators for the GCM. Understanding the approach taken and the elements is considered as vital in this process. Irene, I'm looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Many thanks, Vanessa, and good morning and good afternoon, and a warm welcome to everybody also from my side. It is a pleasure to be with you today to discuss progress on the development of a limited set of indicators to track progress on the implementation of the Global Compact on Migration. I would like to start my presentation by warmly thanking you and Dessa, the co-chair of this workstream, for the great collaboration over the past months, the UN Migration Network Secretariat for their amazing support, and all the members of the workstream for the constructive engagement in developing the first proposal of the limited set of indicators. Let us start by having a look at the paragraph 70 of the IMRF Progress Declaration, which is the paragraph through which member states requested the Secretary General to propose for the consideration of member states a limited set of indicators to assist them upon the request in conducting inclusive reviews of progress related to the implementation of the Global Compact, as well as to include a comprehensive strategy for improving disaggregated migration data at the local, national, regional, and global levels. From this paragraph, there are two deliverables that emerge. One is related to the limited set of indicators, and the other one to a migration data disaggregation strategy. Workstream 1 of the UN Migration Network has been established to address these deliverables. This year, we are working on the development of a proposal for a limited set of indicators, and we are doing so by building on a mapping that we conducted of relevant approaches to measure migration governance in general and with a specific focus on the Global Compact, by developing the discussion note that you have received some weeks ago with the preliminary proposal, and by conducting consultations with member states and a wide range of relevant stakeholders, including through meetings such as the one we are conducting today. Next year, the workstream will then focusing on developing a comprehensive strategy to improve migration data disaggregation. In this slide, you can see an overview of the process that we followed as a workstream to identify the preliminary proposal. We started with a canvassing questionnaire for member states and stakeholders to better understand what are their needs and their perspectives regarding the set of indicators. We then mapped out existing frameworks for mapping 1 and existing indicators, more specifically through a second mapping. And then building on the previous steps, we developed a proposal for a limited set of indicators. Let us now look at these steps more into detail. In February this year, we started the activities of the workstream for a questionnaire through which we wanted to hear from member states and stakeholders worldwide and across regions what are their needs, their priorities for this set of indicators, and what they thought should be considered when developing it. We received almost 100 responses from all regions of the world, and of these, 1/3 were submitted by government entities. We received rich feedback, and in this slide you can see summarized the key points. In fact, respondents agreed that the set should be used to monitor progress over time, that it should incorporate the guiding principle of the Global Compact, that it should be used to inform evidence-based policymaking, have an agreed methodology, and highlight gaps in the implementation of the Global Compact. We use these responses to develop the criteria to be followed for the selection of the indicators, as we will see more into detail in the next slides. So first, we decided to look at what is already available in terms of approaches to measure migration governance in general, and particularly with regard to the objectives of the Global Compact. We decided to do so in 2 steps. First, we looked at indicator frameworks that are available, and we identified 31 frameworks that were relevant. And of these, 16 were developed by academic or research institutions, 3 by the civil society, and 12 by international organizations or processes facilitated by international organizations. And the reason why we decided to start by looking at these frameworks is because this request is already included in paragraph 70, and also because most respondents to the survey told us that they think it would be important that the proposal builds upon existing processes and mandates. Once we identified these 31 indicator frameworks, we compared them based on 5 criteria that you can see in this slide. First, we assessed whether or not frameworks were endorsed intergovernmentally, and we decided to do so in line with paragraph 70 and questionnaire responses, but also because indicators from frameworks that have been endorsed intergovernmentally also tend to undergo a high level of review and scrutiny as to their relevance, scope, and feasibility, as well as of their metadata. We then assessed the relevance for countries belonging to different regions and income levels. And this is a criterion that was considered important to promote a voluntary yet global approach to monitor progress related to the implementation of the Global Compact, which is relevant to countries and migrants in all regions. And it is also important to note here that most respondents to the survey also highlighted that this would be an important point to consider. We then looked at whether or not there is a time series available. In fact, both the paragraph 70 and questionnaire responses told us that they think that it would be important that the set of indicators can be used to monitor progress. And for this, we need to have data for at least 2 points in time. The fourth criterion we considered was timeliness, because we assessed whether there were data available for the different indicator frameworks for the years of adoption of the Global Compact, 2018, and the following years. And finally, we looked at the number of guiding principles of the Global Compact that were covered. And we did so because most respondents to the questionnaire told us that they think it would be important to include the guiding principles in the proposal. In this slide, you can see an overview of the 7 frameworks that met 4 or 5 of the 5 criteria that we just saw. We see that we have 2 frameworks that meet all 5 criteria and that are also endorsed intergovernmentally: the SDG indicator framework and the UN expert group on migration statistics indicators. And then we have 5 indicator frameworks that meet 4 criteria, but are not endorsed intergovernmentally. And these are the Commitment to Development Index, the section with regard to migration, the EMISEM indicator framework, which is an academic indicator framework, the Global Compact on Refugees indicator framework, the IDAC guidelines on indicators for children on the move, and the MGI indicators. In mapping 2, we then had a closer look at the indicators that belonged to these 7 frameworks, and we assessed the relevance for the purpose of this exercise and to monitor progress with regard to different GCM objectives. These were almost 400 indicators, and in addition to this, we also considered a limited number of indicators from other frameworks that were proposed by members of the work streams. We then compared them based on 9 criteria that we will see in just a minute. The report of mapping 1 is already available on the webpage of the UN Migration Network website, and particularly the page of the work stream. And mapping 2 is currently being finalized and will then be published on the same website. In this slide, we can see the 9 criteria that were considered in mapping 2. Some of these are the same criteria that we considered in mapping 1, whereas others are more specific to indicators. So we looked at endorsement by an intergovernmental body. We also looked at coverage of more than one objectives of the Global Compact. And this is a criterion that was included because most survey respondents said that it would be important, or that they think that some indicators should be used to the extent possible to monitor progress on different objectives, therefore being multi-purpose. We also looked at the coverage of more than one principle of the Global Compact, as we just saw. We looked at whether or not the indicators have an agreed methodology. And this was considered important because having an agreed methodology ensures that the indicator is well defined and also that the method of computation is clear. And in addition, most survey respondents also agreed that this was an important criterion to help identify the set of indicators. We then looked at the criterion of being included in more than one indicator framework in order to maximize synergies and avoid duplications, and also in line with the wording of paragraph 70 and questionnaire responses. We then looked at the availability of data by country and region, and as I mentioned earlier, this is to ensure that the set of indicator can be used across different regions and countries, so that we can ensure a voluntary but also global approach. And then we also looked at the availability of a time series and at timeliness, as we saw also for mapping 1. And I would now give the floor to Claire so that she could tell us more about how we then went from mapping 2 to developing the first proposal of a limited set of indicators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irene. And thank you again to IOM for the wonderful cooperation on this project, and to all the members of the workstream for their dedication and engagement. And apologize to the colleagues for my voice, which is still very croaky, but hopefully you can hear me. So I get to present the deliverable that's focused really on the preliminary proposal, which is the document that we have in front of us today. And this work builds on all the steps that Irene has outlined, the questionnaire and the 2 mappings. And it is really the meat of what we will be discussing this week with you, and forming the basis of the proposal that will be going forward. So it consists of 20 core indicators, and these were chosen based on their relevance to the GCM objectives, and because they meet a large number, in some cases all, in some cases many, of the criteria that Irene just explained to you, provide an overview in the previous slide for mapping to the 9 criteria. The mandate from paragraph 70 is very clear. It's a limited set of indicators. That's what member states asked for. But we also realized that the scope of the GCM in terms of its objectives and guiding principles is very broad. And so in addition to the 20 core indicators, the workstream also is suggesting 41 additional indicators. The way we achieved this initial proposal was through extensive consultations. We sent an online questionnaire to the members of the workstream containing the indicators identified in mapping 2, and they were clustered by objective of the GCM, according to 23 objectives. We asked them to select and rank the indicators that they thought were most useful or should be included in relation to those objectives. Then we held 4 meetings, consultations with the members, who include representatives of international organizations and civil society from all different parts of the world. And we went through each objective and discussed each indicator, the pros and cons of including them. And on the basis of that, the co-chairs created a first draft proposal, which was then circulated to the membership again for feedback and was finally revised. And that is the document that we have in front of us today. Next slide, please. This gives you a sense of how the indicators kind of overlap and are structured. And then in the discussion that will be moderated in the second half of the meeting, we'll go into the details. But just to give you a sense, one of the priorities for us was to have a limited set. So we agreed that we'd have 1 to 2 core indicators per objective. And all of these indicators are drawn from either SDG indicator frameworks, the MGI indicators, or the UN expert group meeting on migration statistics, or the IDAC. So they all have most of them have agreed methodology, are endorsed by intergovernmental processes, with the exception of the MGI in this context, and have time series and data availability. We also, the 41 indicators, there's much more variability in terms of the number per objective. It ranges from 1 to 15. 15 is for objective 7. Many of these indicators are multi-purpose, both of the core and of the additional indicators, and we have 8 indicators that are core, but also can be considered additional for some of the other objectives. One aspect that I think for us was very important was to have an agreed methodology. Irene already presented that in the previous slides. And we, in the current proposal, there's only one indicator, and it's an additional indicator that does not have an agreed methodology and a time series and so forth. We included it because we felt it was very important for the topic, for the objective, but we are trying to maintain the balance of really not overburdening governments with new methodologies and new approaches. Next slide, please. So this graph, which is included in the discussion note that was shared with you, gives you a sort of synthetic overview of the number of indicators per objective and per guiding principle. And you can see there is some heterogeneity. So for the objectives, while the core indicators are pretty much between 1 and 2, as I indicated in the previous slide, for the additional ones, there is a lot of variability, with the objectives 2, 7, and 16 having very large numbers, 10 as well, and some of the others much smaller. For the guiding principles, and I think this is an aspect that we've been highlighting in the other meetings as well, we seem to have fairly good coverage for some of the principles, in particular child sensitivity and gender responsiveness. But there are some of the guiding principles for which the indicators that we're including in the proposal may be less appropriate, in particular the whole of government, the whole of society approach, the national sovereignty, and the rule of law. So next slide, please. This is something where in our discussions, as we look at ways to strengthen the proposal, we might need to look into indicators that also address those aspects more clearly. When Irene started the presentation this morning, the slide she showed was about the deliverables for this year, and it had 3 points. And the third one was consultations. Consultations is critical to, as also was introduced by Amy at the beginning, to ensuring that the proposal meets the needs of member states, not just globally, but in all regions. And that's why we envisaged from the beginning to have consultations at different levels and involving different actors. As Amy pointed out, this is one of the 5 regional consultations that's taking place this week. We've already had the meetings for Africa and for the Arab region. And these have been extremely useful and very important for us to ensure that the proposal really reflects regional specificities as well. We will then be holding 3 global consultations with member states and or stakeholders, and these will be held in September and October. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide, just to give you a sense of what to expect going forward in the next steps so that you can engage and participate. We will be sending to you after these regional consultations next week, probably early next week, a survey where we will include all the indicators that are in the note, and we will, in the discussion note, and we will ask you to provide feedback to them, again, indicating whether you find them useful, appropriate, whether they're missing indicators and so forth. This feedback that you will be providing to the questionnaire, as well as the interactions from the discussions this week and the regional consultations, will be used to help inform us revise the discussion note and the proposal, and we will be using it to make it stronger and again reflect these regional specificities. We will then have the 3 global consultations with member states and stakeholders, hopefully in person in New York and in Geneva, and as well as perhaps online. And after these meetings, we will again take stock of the feedback and revise the proposal. In late 2023, we will have the final proposal, which will then be submitted for consideration of the Executive Committee of the UN Migration Network. I thank you for your attention and very much look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, co-leads, for your overview. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Mrs. Keiko Osaki Tomita. Mrs. Keiko Osaki Tomita is the president of Tokiwa University and Tokiwa Junior College, located in Japan. Prior to the current position, she had 30 years professional career with the United Nations, responsible for research on population dynamics, international migration, gender, and social integration, as well as development of statistical systems. Between 2009 and 2018, she held the position of the Assistant Director and Chief of Demographic and Social Statistics Branch at the Statistics Division at the United Nations, and was involved in the development of SDG indicators for the purpose of SDG monitoring. She continues to serve as a member of the United Nations Expert Group on International Migration Statistics. I also have the pleasure to have her as a section chief, where prior to 2009, she was the chief of the population section at ESCAP, leading the work on migration in the Asia-Pacific region. She will provide us with a regional perspective of the challenges and opportunities associated with developing a limited set of indicators for monitoring the implementation of the GCM. Keiko-san, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for the very kind introduction. Great to see you. Hello, dear participants, former colleagues and friends. I'd like to thank first the UN Network on Migration for inviting me to this important consultation. It's really great pleasure that I take a part of this important process and reviewing the proposed limited set of indicators to review progress related to GCM. I do recall, I think it's way back to 2016, I think a very exciting moment culminating to the formulation of GCM together with the GCR, Global Compact for Refugees. I think it was back in 2016. And I was then one of the United Nations staff member. I do recall there were strong desires then to establish cooperative framework to better manage human mobility against the backdrops of growing irregular migration and deprived flights of migrants at the destination. So there are strong voices we hear from many places that we need to find a mechanism which leverage the benefit of migration while reducing negative impacts of migration. So I do recall this exciting moment. But putting this nostalgia on the side, I understand that my role today as a keynote speaker is to inform you of the key features of international migration in Asia and Pacific region and address relevant issues in order to set the stage for discussion or consultation which will follow. So let me start. First of all, so what characterized the international migration in Asia and the Pacific region? The region being about 60% of the world population, the region is diverse, vast, and complex. So are the population movements in the region. Here are some features. First of all, given very quickly rising economies and political powers in the region, the bulk of migration is inter-regional. We need to take note of it first. With migration taking place not only from the global north, but also from south to south, with all directions, that we should know that this Asian Pacific region has some of the world's largest migration corridors in the region. Second, while migration in the region is driven by a variety of reasons and causes, the dominant form of migration in the region is temporary labor migration, with almost half of migrants being women. Many of those migrants find jobs in strong economies in the region, as well as in the Middle East, especially GCC countries. Migrants are predominantly in semi and low-skilled workers in informal sectors, and yet they look for the work at that foreign destination. Another feature, although this is difficult to attest with data, it is very likely that irregular migration is also very significant in the region. Given very restrictive and complex migration policies in many countries, and also coupled with the region's long and porous land and sea borders, there is no doubt that the significant irregular migration. So furthermore, the region has witnessed very mixed migration flows, including asylum seekers, stateless persons, and people displaced by conflicts, natural disasters, or environmental change. So I think it is clear here the migration in the Asia-Pacific region is an overly complex phenomenon. And we have a daunting task of coming up with a limited set of indicators to review progress related to GCM implementation. Now, therefore, I'd like to offer you some food of thoughts for which hopefully I could be useful and helpful for your interventions and the revisions of set of indicators. First of all, I'd like to commend the work stream on their mapping of existing indicator frameworks relevant to migration governance, including, of course, SDGs. I found them very, very comprehensive. But I want you to know that very comprehensive, and also most of them are already globally agreed development frameworks and indicators. What it means is that there's no worries about budgetary implications in recommending any indicators in front of us. They are already supported by international statistics community. I'm saying this because I understand in this kind of international debate with the member states and the government officials, it's often the critical and strong concern about the budgetary implication of adding new indicators. So from the very outset, at the beginning, I think we should make it very clear what we are doing is not adding any new indicators which may have cost implications. Another point, in my quick review of the preliminary proposal, there is no significant omissions or gaps in the proposed set of indicators in light of the migration in Asian Pacific region. It's very comprehensive, I find it. However, I noticed that some indicators has mentioning or reference to legislation or legal frameworks relevant to labor rights, which I would imagine make some countries and government a bit nervous, especially when they are hosting a large number of foreign workers in their territories. I'd like to underscore, therefore, here, we are not talking about any new legal frameworks to govern migration. Most, which are already listed here, are already internationally agreed legal documents. So therefore, and also the proposed limited set of indicators in no ways intend to pressure national compliance of legislation. So we should also bear this in mind in discussing. I'd also like to underscore the importance of data disaggregation, especially by sex and migration status in the context of Asian Pacific region. Migration in this region comprises a significant volume of women in either labor migration or irregular migration. The disaggregation of data by sex enormously help us to elucidate the plight of female migrants who are reportedly placed in a disadvantaged situation in a place of migration. Also, disaggregation by migrant status, we can also benefit a lot from by this exercise. And in this context, I'd like to mention that the recent work by the expert group on international migration statistics, which are under the guidance of the UN Statistical Commission. This expert group has recently produced the kind of guidance on data disaggregation by migration status. So you may want to have some consultation with their work. Last but not least, let me also reiterate the significance of coordination in collection and dissemination migration data and statistics. As you know it very well, migration is multidimensional phenomena. In order to fully understand the mechanism of migration in a comprehensive manner, we need to gather information and data from a wide range of sources and from a variety of stakeholders, including different government offices in a country, NGOs, and even private sectors. So whatever set of indicators you select eventually as my minimum set, we should bear in mind in practice the coordination and collaboration among different data producers will be a key for reviewing GCM implementation. Well, with this, I'd like to conclude my short intervention, and I really wish you a very active participation and vigorous exchanges of views during this regional consultation. I very much look forward to hearing about the outcomes of today's consultation. Good luck to your endeavors. Thank you. Over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Keiko-san. And thank you for sharing your insights, which actually confirm the experience by ESCAP and the Regional Network on Migration. The Asia-Pacific Regional Network on Migration conducted the first regional review of the Global Compact in 2021 and has already initiated preparations for the second review. Already the first review of the Global Compact demonstrated that data on international migration in the region remain a bottleneck, in spite of improvements done. Assessment conducted by ESCAP on data availability of SDG indicators showed that data is insufficient for many indicators, and disaggregation is often not available or very limited. And that lack of data is mostly limited to statistical capacity. The complexity of migration, as indicated by Keiko Osaki in the region, makes data collection on migration even more difficult. And often lack of existence of uniform divisions make it even more complex. I should also inform that ESCAP is currently conducting a project in North and Central Asia to build capacities on migration data collection in that sub-region. And we are pleased to share the results of that project in a later stage. Further, we are currently conducting mapping of the pledges that countries made in implementation of the Global Compact. And unfortunately, the mapping showed that only few countries actually pledged to improve data collection. So this also confirms that more work needs to be done. We would like to stress that ESCAP and the regional network stand ready to support member states in the development of SDG indicators. To conclude, I encourage all participants to actively engage in the upcoming sessions, share your perspectives, and contribute with your expertise. My role ends here. I look forward to listening to the further discussion, and I'm pleased to hand over the meeting to Mr. Paul Tacon, who is now a labor migration specialist at the ILO in Geneva. I should also say a former colleague from us here at ESCAP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you also to Keiko as well for that really interesting presentation, to Amy for her introduction, and of course to Irina and to Claire for their really important introduction and presentation of the process so far. So as you've heard, it's been quite a long process, or it's felt like it could have been a longer process, but we've had to pack a lot of activities into a very short time. So I've been a member of the workstream since the inception of the workstream at the beginning of this year, as when the new work plan of the network came into effect. On behalf of ILO, I've been representing our perspective on this indicator framework, which we do see as an extremely critical element of ensuring accountability and follow-up and implementation on the GCM. This is perhaps particularly important because, as you may be aware, several of the migration-specific indicators, which are those related to target 8.8, which is about decent work, including for migrant workers, and 10.7, where 10.7.1 is the indicator on recruitment costs, which is an indicator of fair recruitment, which is extremely critical in both the in achieving SDG 10.7 and in the GCM as a whole. These are either led or co-led, or ILO is the custodian or co-custodian of these indicators. So noting that the SDGs are really the basis for this, the SDG indicators are the basis for this indicator framework, we think it's a really good opportunity to consider how we use this data, how we gather this data, how we might perhaps push forward some of our efforts in this regard to support both SDG implementation and GCM implementation. So as I'm sure you're all aware, and I think the presentations have highlighted very clearly, the GCM is a very comprehensive framework. So this task of developing a limited set of indicators that is practical, easy for governments to use, Keiko mentioned, which doesn't bring in huge budgetary implications, is an extremely daunting one. I do want to really recognize Irina and Claire for their incredible work in putting this together in such a short time. And also, I'd really like to say that this has been a very inclusive process. The work stream is not just UN agencies. I want to highlight that we have representatives of trade unions. ITUC is a member of the work stream. We have a representative from diaspora, from civil society. So it's really a multi-stakeholder work stream. And I do want to say that there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth, a lot of meaningful interactions. So we've really had the opportunity to provide really big inputs on this framework, inputs that have been taken into account. And I think this is really, really important because this also sets the tone for the consultation that we're going to have right now in the next, I think, hour and a half that we have. And I think this is a good way to maybe encourage you to really engage in this discussion because really we will be taking a lot of notes and we will be really looking to see how we can implement the changes that you suggest. Now, I think the way that this session will be structured is that we will have 5 panels preceded by a sort of general discussion. So first, we'll open the floor for comments on individual or sort of on the overall framework. And I think if we do have any member states, it would be really great to have your inputs on this as really the kind of key audience for this framework. And then that will be followed by these 5 panels, which will follow the 5 roundtables of the International Migration Review Forum. Thank you. So that basically means we'll have clustered the objectives because again, it's 23 objectives, it's huge, and then we'll address them together. And then once we've had some discussion on that, we can then move on to the next panel. So first of all, I'd like to open the floor for any general comments on the frameworks. So if you use the reactions button, you can use that to raise your hand. And we'll be monitoring also the chat to get all the feedback. So yes, I just want to highlight some of the guiding questions for the overall consultation. So we're asking, is the proposed limited set of indicators for the GCM suitable in terms of its relevance, scope, coverage, balance, and ability to compare progress over time and across different countries and regions? Does the preliminary proposal align well with global frameworks such as the SDGs, while also reflecting regional migration dynamics? I mean, certainly Keiko mentioned the importance of temporary labor migration in the Asia-Pacific region. So is that sufficiently accounted for in the indicators that have been proposed? And are there any additional specific migration dimensions or sub-regional variations that should be considered in the proposal? So we are perhaps sitting at the global level, we have perhaps the view from 30,000 feet. And so sometimes we miss perhaps the nuances and subtleties that you're more aware of, being closer to where the action is happening. So we would really appreciate your inputs on if there's anything we've missed. So I don't know if anyone would like to provide any general feedback at this stage on the indicator framework as a whole. I'm not seeing anyone asking for the floor yet. We do. Okay, so I see Liz Villegas. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Paul, for the opportunity. I'm Liz from the United Cities and Local Governments Asia Pacific. So first of all, allow me to commend the current progress on the development of the indicators. Just one question, and I believe this falls in the overall framework. So we have seen that one of the indicator framework that was referenced is the MGI. So may we know if it also includes the local MGI that was developed by IOM? And another point is we look forward to the opportunity to contribute to the process as a stakeholder group of local governments during the survey that will be held in August. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Liz. Before asking Claire or Irina to come in, I'd just like to check if there's anyone else who would like to take the floor at this stage. And really any comments that you have, very, very valuable and welcome. If not, I don't see any hands going up, so maybe I'll hand over to Irina or Claire to answer this question. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you also to Liz for this question. Yes, indeed, the MGI was one of the frameworks that was selected for mapping 1, and therefore we included indicators, the 94 indicators from the national MGI indicator framework for mapping 2. We didn't include the local indicators at this stage because we were looking more at indicators that could be relevant at the national level. But we do agree that this is also a very important point. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Irina, and thank you. These are exactly the kinds of questions that we're looking to answer, or to spark thought on how we might proceed, and again to also encourage UCLG and others to continue to interact with the work of the workstream, because we do really value your inputs. If nobody else would like to take the floor at this stage, I think we can move on to the first panel. So this will be looking at the potential indicators for objectives 2, 5, 6, 12, and 18. I was going to say a prize for anyone who can tell me what all those objectives relate to. But here we have so-called objective 2, which is about minimizing the adverse drivers of migration. Objective 5, which is about regular pathways for migration. Objective 6, which is about recruitment, fair and ethical recruitment and decent work for migrant workers. Objective 12 on screening and referral, and Objective 18 on skills development and recognition. So it's this is one really focused on labor migration. When we were organizing the IMRF, this was one panel, the roundtable actually, that ILO and UNDP kind of co-led the roundtable in New York on this. So I'm very familiar with this set of objectives. And for this, we've come up with a number of core indicators, which I believe are on the next slide. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, brilliant. So we have 2 indicators for all of the objectives apart from objective 18. So I'll just go through them very quickly. So for objective 2, we have 2 indicators, core indicators, and I should say In addition to this, there are the additional indicators because there are a number of topics that are cross-cutting or issues that are perhaps not entirely captured here, but which may not always be gathered at country level. So, but the two core indicators that we have here are unemployment rate by sex, age, and persons with disabilities, which comes from the SDG framework, SDG 8.5.2. And then the other indicator for this objective is whether or not the national migration strategy addresses migration linked to environmental degradation and the adverse effects of climate change. Certainly, climate change is a big part of Objective 2 and is increasingly taking up a lot of space in discussions on migration. So this is trying to reflect that. Then for Objective 5, we have, again, two indicators, both coming from SDG 10.7.2, which is basically the regular survey sent out to member states on migration policies, which has a number of subcategories. So here we're looking at whether or not the government has a national policy or strategy for regular migration pathways, including labor migration, and whether or not the government has measures to foster cooperation among countries and encourage stakeholder inclusion and participation in migration policy. So moving on to Objective 6 on fair and ethical recruitment and decent work. Here we again have two SDG indicators, so SDG 8.8.2 and 10.7.1. So again, these are really focused on the main migration targets of the SDGs. So we have the level of national compliance with labor rights, freedom of association and collective bargaining, based on ILO textual sources and national legislation by sex and migrant status. And then we have a recruitment cost borne by employee as a proportion of monthly income earned in country of destination. So the two indicators there for Objective 6. For Objective 12, whether or not the government has migration information and awareness raising campaigns from SDG 10.7.2, and whether or not the country has a clear and transparent set of rules and regulations pertaining to migration, which are that they should be available to the public, easy to consult and easy to understand, which comes from the migration governance indicators. Finally, for Objective 18, we just have the one indicator, which is whether or not the government facilitates the recognition of skills and qualifications acquired abroad, again, coming from SDG 10.7.2. So this is the proposal that we have right now on the table. And I think I'd like to open the floor to anyone who would like to comment on this set of indicators. I think in the previous discussions, there's been a lot of discussion around this set of indicators, so looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So please do raise your hand when you speak. If you can also just remember to identify your organization and perhaps if you can turn your camera on just to give a good sense of who's talking. So please do feel free to come in. Looking forward to your inputs. Thank you. Seems to be a lot of consensus on this set of indicators. So just to maybe remember, we're asking, is this appropriate? Is there something at regional level that is not being addressed by these indicators? And please also, if you perhaps don't feel confident speaking up, or if your connection is not so great, please do also feel free. We are monitoring the chat, so please do also feel free to make any interventions in the chat, and I can read those out, and we can respond to those interventions as well. So, and again, if you do want to raise your hands, just click on the reactions button. That's where you can find the raise hand function. So I'm going to give a bit more opportunity for people to come in. We do really look forward to hearing from you on this. Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Please go ahead. So Rebecca had her hand up and her camera on. Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah. Yes, I had my mute button on. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to note that in the International Forum on Migration Statistics in Santiago in January, we had some really good discussion around 10.7.1 and that this region was leading globally on that indicator on SDG 10.7.1. So just wanted to thank the governments in the room who've been participating to make that one a reality. I know we have studies on that indicator in Malaysia, capturing Filipino and Indonesian migrants. We have a study on Thailand that's capturing CLM migrants. I know Nepal is working on integrating 10.7.1 into their LFS, and that Vietnam has done a really good pilot recently. There's probably others that I'm missing, but just wanted to indicate that we are leading as a region in this one, and I'm really glad to see it's made it to a core indicator.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. I see we also have Jack Amick from UMCOR. Please go ahead.
Hello, good morning or good evening. Yeah, I was just curious, and maybe this is, if this question is out of line, then we can just move it. But I'm curious about whether or not was consideration on an indicator that would address the issue of passports being held by employers, whether there's a law, whether or not there's a law that prohibits that. Was that considered, or was that too fine a detail?
Sorry, I was muted the whole time. Thank you, Jack. Sorry about that. And I see we have another intervention from the Philippines. Jet Olfato, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. Just want to quickly ask two things. First is whether there are indicators related to wages, which would address the issue of wage theft. And second, on objective 17, on the indicators on perceptions of migration, I think there can be a lot of room to add more, to make this more robust, and I think the network can work with GFMD on this, where there had been rich discussion on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I just want to see if there's anyone else who would like to speak up right now. Otherwise, I would pass it back to the co-chairs. Okay. I don't think there's anything right now, so maybe if I can give it to Claire and Irina to respond to the questions we had so far.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much also to the speakers who have intervened with comments, such as Rebecca providing some information and discussions that were made in Santiago, and also to Jack and the other speaker for the question. The questions you made refer in particular to labor rights, and more specifically to some specific aspects such as wages and the retention of passports. Now, with regard to these objective 5 that that is included in this panel, and also with regard to the other objectives, what you see in this slide are the core indicators, which are the indicators that we proposed for each objective in the number of 1 or 2 as being really the core, meaning that they are the most relevant and also the ones that met the most criteria for mapping to. However, if you have a look at the discussion note that you should have received, and that is also available on the website of the workstream, in this discussion note, which includes the preliminary proposal for the limited set of indicators, you will see that there is a section in which for each objective we have both core and additional indicators. And with regard to objective 5 in particular, this has been one thematic that has been very present also in discussions internal to the work stream. We were lucky to have particularly 2 workstream members who worked in very deep expertise regarding labor migration. We had Paul. We also had the Trade Union Confederation, the International Trade Union Confederation, who is also with us today and may also want to perhaps intervene and provide their perspectives going forward with discussions. But this has really allowed us to look at the different aspects that are related to labor rights and also to different aspects that could be of relevance to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irina. Claire, would you like to add anything?
Thanks, Paul. I think I just wanted to, since we've been participating in the other regional consultations, I wanted just to bring in some of those elements that might be interesting to the participants in this meeting, because I think Irene has already addressed many of the comments. So these issues that were raised in the other regional discussions really were surrounding the issue of recruitment. It was very something that many participants were extremely interested in understanding. The indicator 1071, how to improve the capacity for collecting it. As the colleague from ILO has mentioned, it's a complex indicator, and it's something I think including it in the limited set of indicators to monitor the Global Compact, as well as in the SDGs, might create a synergy to actually help improve the capacity of national statistical offices and other government entities involved in the data collection. The other aspect that I think was highlighted was related to the recognition of skills. And there was a lot of debate around that, in particular yesterday in the Arab region, the issue of skills and how those are often not properly recognized, and the loss of human capital associated is something that is clearly of a key interest, and we struggled working on it in terms of the indicators that can capture some of the aspects there. So I think these are areas where if you feel that you also, if not today, when you answer the questionnaire next week, if you have additional comments or insights, I think we would very much benefit from your perspective. So please don't be shy. We're here to listen to you. This is really a chance for us to learn from you, and we look forward to your interventions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. I have seen that Irem would like to speak, so maybe if I can give the floor to Irem Alf from ITUC, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm also just, similar to what Claire, Irene, and you have also raised. The limitations in front of us were in terms of the limited numbers. So we had to propose core indicators that could capture kind of the soul of the main objective, but of course the objective within itself has many detailed sub-objectives, if I may call them as such, and definitely wage theft is an issue, and retention of documents, passports. Unfortunately, I mean, even in the additional indicators for objective 6 or 5, we were not able to get into such details, but we hope that the 882 SDG indicator would help capture some of those issues when the progress is measured, when the evaluation in terms of implementation is done. I forgot to introduce myself, but I believe Paul had done. I'm from International Trade Union Confederation, which is a global organization bringing together union organizations globally, and we represent almost 200 million workers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hiram. I'm also seeing there's a comment in the chat from Wesley from UNESCO. Wesley, would you like to maybe take the floor?
Hi, Paul and colleagues. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say I'm enjoying the level of detail and the challenge that we're getting on. I just wanted to say that we have the Tokyo Convention on Recognition. So this is for Objective 18. It's quite relevant for SDG 4.3 as well, which is related. But we know this is a challenge. UNESCO Bangkok's happy to be part of this in terms of using existing normative instruments and existing reporting, and then feeding into this process on a very reasonable core indicator.
Thank you very much, Wesley. Indeed, skills is really a critical issue, something we're also seeing through our work, and a lot of work, especially in Asia, on skill recognition and sort of harmonization of skills to really ensure that migrant workers get decent work, and to make sure that they can also contribute to the maximum. I'm just going to leave last 10-15 seconds for anyone else who would like to raise their hands if there's any other inputs that you would like to come in, to provide at this stage. And of course, as Claire and Irene have pointed out, there will be a further opportunity to comment through a survey. So we do, this isn't the last possibility, but we do find it's very useful to have a dialogue that can be quite interactive and spark some ideas. But if not, well, we're well within the time, so that's great. Maybe we can move on to the next panel. So this relates to the roundtable 2, which is, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Which is one where I didn't do this one on the IMRF, so I don't know the indicators quite so well. But this is really related to a lot of the work on sort of direct migration management. So we have objectives. Sorry, I'm just looking for papers. There we go. So this is objectives 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, and 21. So here we go. So this is looking at legal identity and documentation, saving lives, saving lives of migrants during migration journeys, counter-smuggling, eradicating trafficking, managing borders. 13, if I remember well, it's alternatives to detention, and 21, which is about return and readmission. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, then we can look at the core indicators. So fewer indicators, well, maybe this is only slide 1. So first, for objective 4, we have one core indicator, which is the proportion of children under 5 years of age whose births have been registered with the civil authority by age. For objective 8, we have, and for objective 4, that's an SDG indicator. For objective 8, we also have an SDG indicator, which is 10.7.3, which is the number of people who died or disappeared in the process of migration towards an international destination. We have another indicator there, which is from the Migration Governance Index, which is whether or not the country has systems in place, including formal cooperation agreements or arrangements with other countries to trace and identify missing migrants within the national territory. For objective 9, which is about smuggling, we have an indicator coming from SDG 10.7.2, whether or not the government has a formal strategy or formal strategies to address trafficking in persons and migrant smuggling. For objective 10, we have the, again, SDG indicator 16.2.2, number of victims of human trafficking per 100,000 population by sex, age, and form of exploitation. For objective 11, we have the estimated number of persons in detention due to entering the country irregularly in a given year. Do we have another slide for the other indicators? I know, that's a different slide. Okay, so this is the set of indicators we have. So looking at 4, 8, 9, 10, 11. So with that, I would like to open the floor again for any inputs that you have on this set of indicators. Please do go ahead.
I have a question. I'm just wondering if any of these indicators are disaggregated by age. I mean, I think it's something that we should consider, given some of them, especially the GCM objective 10 and the indicator. Well, that one is already there, and so is the 4th one. But for none of the others, do we have any age and sex related disaggregation? And I was wondering if that's something that has been thought of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a good question. Is there anyone else who would like to come in right now? Just a reflection, perhaps from my side, while people are still sort of taking this in. Certainly under objective 10, I do want to sort of highlight the importance of some of the additional indicators which we're not seeing up here right now, but which are very much relevant. So we have, for objective 10, for example, from the ILO perspective, of course, we look very seriously at the issue of forced labor in the context of human trafficking. And that is therefore reflected in some of the additional indicators. So what we see here is really just trying, as Iram said, trying to capture the essence of the indicator, but of the objective, but there is more granular detail possible by adding in additional indicators. So thanks for that. In terms of, yes, the other objectives, I think I misspoke. I said there were 5 panels, there's only 4 panels, so that's already a bit less. And I think the other indicators will be, the other objectives will be addressed in another panel. So sorry, that's confusion from my side. Please, anyone would like to take the floor at all?
Hi, Paul. Hannah here. I've got a quick question. So yeah, I did pop a question in the chat about the indicators for objective 13 and 21, but from what you just said, I understand that's coming later. I don't think it was a fault on your part. In the agenda, I did say it would be in panel 2 as well. So just wanting to confirm that's coming later. And also something that I wanted to flag about the second core indicator here relating to GCM objective 8. Might it be good to maybe tweak the wording a little bit to say, number of people who died or disappeared in the process of migration towards or in an international destination? My thinking around this, and of course open to feedback, is that, for example, many people, when they arrive at an international destination, end up in detention facilities. And that's, of course, very much still part of the process of migration, and they lose their lives there. So maybe just to make sure that deaths in detention are something that's encapsulated within this indicator as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Hannah. Maybe I'll pass it back to the co-chairs to answer these questions, because I think they're both quite technical and they really have the expertise. So Irena and Claire, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for these wonderful questions. And yes, apologies for the confusion about the objective 13. We're just checking something to make sure, and we'll get back to you to make sure that it's included in the panel. So the issue about the age disaggregation is absolutely critical. And indeed, in the notes, in the discussion note, we have an annex table where we're sort of a little bit anticipating what we think will be the critical work that will be undertaken by the work stream in 2024, which is really looking at the comprehensive strategy for disaggregation. And age, sex, of course, are some of the two characteristics, the two demographic characteristics that are absolutely critical. And so your point is very well taken. And we definitely are cognizant of the need to have this this further ability to look at the intersection between the characteristics of the migrants, their age, their sex, and so forth, to make sure that the SDG indicators are useful in the context of the GCM. The other question, I think we're at a at a critical juncture in terms of really looking into these indicators, making sure that they are well balanced and reflected. When we look at the indicator 8, this is an SDG indicator that the IOM is the co-custodian, and the wording of the SDG indicators in particular, as many of you know, is extremely delicate to modify, because these are indicators that are part of a framework, an indicator framework, which is endorsed intergovernmentally, and there is a process, the IAG SDG group, which is made up of member states on a rotating basis who review the indicators, make sure that they're well specified, that the methodology is appropriate. It's national statistical offices mostly participating, and the agencies and civil society participate as observers. And so any change to the wording has to be approved by this entity, this body. So of course it can be done, but it has to be done in a way that's very careful, because also any change to the language of the indicator potentially modifies the ability to use it as a to monitor trends over time. If the indicator changes in terms of its scope or its definition, then you have a break potentially in the time series. So that's something just to keep in mind. We've received that feedback for some of the other regional consultations as well, where it would be very tempting to want to tweak or change some of the language of the SDG indicators, because it would make it perhaps better aligned to the needs of the GCM monitoring. But in some contexts, that might not always be perhaps the best approach. And that's why I think we're also encouraging you to think, if this indicator does meet the needs and it can be used to monitor, because of what Keiko also pointed out, the fact that it's already being collected, that the data are available, that the methodology has been agreed or looked at in depth by national statistical offices and other experts, then that's something we can build on, reduce the burden on member states in terms of additional costs, additional monitoring. But if the indicators do not meet the needs, then that's where we need to be more critical. And I think I just wanted to give a little bit of that background. So I'm sure many of you are aware of that, but just to get that sensitivity to the complexity of making any changes. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Irina, do you want to come in as well?
I think Claire provided a very good background. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think there's a sense that we'll it's going to be a lot of work to get this this indicator framework across the line. And then as soon as that's done, possibly even before that's done, our work is not done because there'll be the additional data disaggregation strategy, which will be another, I think, huge piece of work. So I think we signed up for a lot of work in this work stream. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of years going through this. So thank you very much to Ishani and to Hannah for your questions and comments. It's really, really useful and a good opportunity to have this kind of discussion and to sort of understand where there could be changes, where it might be more difficult. Again, I just wanted to give colleagues another chance to come in. Not seeing anything in the chat. I see Anisor has introduced himself. Thank you. If there's no other comments, I don't want to rush. Oh, someone.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. We would like to perhaps present an additional slide because, as you rightly mentioned, we also had objectives 13 and 21 for this panel. I could perhaps rapidly share my screen to present the two core indicators, so that you could, Paul, kindly also present the two core indicators, the two objectives with its core indicators. That's okay. If perhaps, yes. Please let me know if you can see my screen going forward.
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. Would you like to present them, Paul, or shall I? As you wish. Maybe you can go ahead.
Okay, sure. So thanks, Irena. So yes, we have two additional objectives there. So objective 13 on alternative to detention. And I know that's something which is very important in the context of Asia Pacific. And 21 on dignified return and reintegration. So, so we can move on to the indicators. So we have, for objective 13, two indicators. Two core indicators. So we have the estimated number of persons in detention due to entering the country irregularly in a given year, which comes from the IDAC framework and the expert group on migration statistics. And then a second one from the Migration Governance Index, which is whether or not the country has a policy or strategy to ensure, ensure that migrant detention is only used as a measure of last resort and work towards non-custodial alternatives to detention. So, there we go. And then for objective 21 on return is whether, the existence of a formal government program or dedicated policy that focuses on facilitating the reintegration of returning nationals, which comes from the Migration Governance Index. So indicators there for a couple more objectives. So yeah, I'd like to open the floor again for anyone who would like to comment on those. I know IDC is here and may want to highlight some points there. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Paul. You've kind of put me on the spot there, I guess. Yes, as you know, IDC has been involved with, my colleagues have been involved with discussing this with the team. Yeah, I just wanted to ask maybe some clarification and I guess suggest a big on suggesting wording today, aren't I? But I'll pop that in the chat, maybe just to add a little bit more nuance to the core indicator on ATD, to specify that immigration detention is only used for adults. I think that's important to put in because I think global consensus is child immigration detention is a no-go. And then continuing to say and working towards non-custodial alternatives to detention. And I think it's important to kind of hold them accountable as well to that law and policy because, you know, some of the governments here have strategies that, you know, never see the light of day. But I'll pop that in the chat. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Hannah. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but it's great to have this expertise because, you know, again, we don't always have that perspective. And I see Ishani also would like to speak, so please go ahead, Ishani.
Sorry, it's the same comment that Hannah had about adults, because I think that's really very important, not just because I'm from UNICEF, but I think as she mentioned, globally there is that push towards making sure that detention is only a last resort for adults and children are not kept in detention. And the same comment as earlier about age disaggregation, I think it's really very important for us to have that information. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Anissa, I think also maybe would like to make a point. So Anissa, please go ahead if you'd like to speak up. Rebecca, I see your hand up, so please go.
Hi again. I've just been looking through all the core indicators overall, as well as even the list of additional ones. And it seemed, I just wanted to give feedback that women seem a bit absent or very absent, and that there could be some integration into both the core and the additional set that's really a focus on women's issues. And if my colleague Jenna Holiday is here and able to speak, we've been doing quite a bit of work together on domestic work issues as well as on women migrant workers over the last few years. So she had some ideas to plug, if you're there, Jenna.
Hi, funny enough, I was just writing that in the chat. So yeah, thank you, Rebecca. So a couple of the ideas that I was just looking at was around indicator 521 and 5C1. So these are the indicators around violence, so proportion of women who experience violence, and proportion of countries with systems to track and make public allocations for gender equality, potentially being drivers. I appreciate that that's under the earlier panel. But also proportion of time spent on unpaid domestic and care work, potentially being an additional indicator for vulnerability of migrants. So something that we know that that the need for migrant workers to provide unpaid domestic and care work being a reason why they're not often able to get access to the same services or systems or regularity or so on. I'm sure everybody here is very aware of that. So I think that there's certainly a few areas where some of those indicators under SDG 5 could be plugged in as additional. I would also advocate potentially that 511 could be higher up as a core indicator somewhere as well. But appreciate that there is an opportunity for written feedback as well. So so I'll put it in the chat and then maybe also provide it in the written feedback.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Jenna. Really, really useful. I think exactly the kind of feedback that we want. You know, we get caught up in this and we sometimes can't see the forest for the trees. So thank you really for those concrete suggestions. There were, maybe I'll pass the floor back to Claire and Irena because there were the suggestions from Hannah and Ishani regarding alternatives to detention. So please go ahead, Claire or Irena.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think the comments on the alternatives to detention are very, very important. We had the benefit of having one of the co-leads of the work stream on alternatives to detention, who's also from UNICEF, trying to help guide some of our discussions there. And one of the additional indicators proposed, the one that in fact is outside of the existing indicator frameworks, does indeed touch upon this issue of children, which I think is so critical, and that's why we actually included it. We also have a subcategory of 1072, which also speaks to unaccompanied minors, but not necessarily to detention in the same way. So I think this is an area which is clearly where the existing indicators probably do not address in sufficient detail the aspect of children, and that's why we've included it. But again, the aspect of disaggregation is critical, and age definitely being one of the key dimensions. In terms of women, I agree. We don't have very many gender-specific indicators. We do have the one you mentioned on 511, and we also, we try to struggle, especially like in discussing some of the adverse drivers, looking at gender violence and gender inequality possibly contributing. There was a lot of discussion on this, and we tried to strike a balance, also recognizing again the disaggregation aspect would perhaps give an additional lens into some of these gender dimensions. But again, we encourage you very much to share your feedback, especially in writing through the questionnaire, because I think it will be perhaps easier than in some of these discussions, which are more broad, to highlight areas where you think we could strengthen the proposal, or where an indicator might be indeed missing. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Irene, would you like to add anything?
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Claire, very much for these points. I think Claire's response was very comprehensive, so nothing to add from my side. Thank you.
Great, and I see Rebecca has her hand up, and then Hannah. So Rebecca, please.
Sure. I just wanted to note from some experience working on the International Labor Migration Statistics database for the last 5 years. We've really been pushing sex disaggregation and all of the indicators that we have while requiring it, but still that's not data that's always provided by governments, whether they don't collect it or they don't collect enough migration data to be able to disaggregate in that way or in other ways, becomes a real challenge. So just to push that disaggregation is good and we have to push for it, but having some standalone indicators both on children, women's issues. I mean, there's other groups we could highlight as well. I think it makes a difference, because that disaggregation doesn't always happen and shouldn't be our fallback to catch certain issues.
Thank you for that clarification. I thought I saw another hand up. Anna, was it?
Yep, it was me. Thanks, Paul. Just a quick comment to follow up on what Claire shared, I think. So just to check, Claire, I think you mentioned that there is already another indicator that's not a core indicator, it's separate at the moment, that's specific on child detention. Is that right? I just wanted to follow up quickly about that.
Yes, that's correct. It's one of the additional indicators. So if you look at the discussion note that was shared, it has, objective by objective, the core, and then the list of additional, and you'll see it there. And that was proposed by the work stream on the alternatives to detention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. If nobody else would like to come in, I think we've had quite a good, robust discussion on this panel. So maybe we can move on to the next panel. So we're just going to shift over the presentation. We've got and just for everyone, there's a link to the discussion note in the chat, and there you can actually see all the additional indicators as well. So just to, so it's clear what we're talking about. So maybe, yeah, if we can put up the presentation for the third panel. This will be covering objectives. Okay, we have, that's panel 3. Okay, so we have objectives 1, 3, 7, 17, and 23. So these are focusing on strengthening data, on ensuring provision of information for migrants, reducing migrants' vulnerabilities, eliminating discrimination, and promoting international cooperation on migration. So if we can move to the next slide, please, so you can see the indicators. Great. So we have, again, we have 2 indicators for objective 1, 2 for objective 17, and 1 each for 3, 7, and 23. So for objective 1, we have the number or proportion of of international migrants in the total resident population coming from the IDAC framework. And then we have another indicator from SDG 10.7.2 on whether or not the government has a mechanism to ensure that migration policy is informed by data appropriately disaggregated. So that's really focusing on the capacity side and, well, capacity and using migration for decision making. For objective 3, we have a question on whether or not the government has migration information and awareness raising campaigns. That comes from SDG 10.7.2. Objective 7, also coming from SDG 10.7.2, we have whether or not the government provides non-nationals equal access to services, welfare benefits, and rights, regardless of immigration status, or only for those with legal immigration status. For objective 17, we have the proportion of population reporting having personally felt discriminated against or harassed in the previous 12 months on the basis of a ground of discrimination prohibited under international human rights law. This comes from the SDGs, SDG 10.3.1 and 16.b.1. And then we have another indicator on whether or not the government provides non-nationals equal access to social services, well, the same one from objective 7, actually. And then for objective 23, whether or not the government has measures to foster cooperation among countries and encourage stakeholder inclusion and participation in migration policy, again, coming from SDG 10.7.2. So these are the sets of indicators that we have for this panel. And so again, I'd just like to open the floor to anyone who would like to come in to make any specific inputs or suggestions on this set of core indicators. So please do, raise your hands. I see Farah from Statistics Indonesia. Please go ahead, Farah. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. My name is Farah from Statistics Indonesia. I'm honored to provide feedback for this preliminary proposal for a limited set of indicators measuring GCM implementation. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to the UN Network on Migration and the workstream team that has facilitated this forum. We realize the significance of this forum in raising awareness of this proposal. Previously, we also sent responses to the questionnaire on the critical elements that should be reflected in the proposal. We have seen the efforts put forth by everyone here. Thus, I, on behalf of Statistics Indonesia, want to thank each and every one of you for the dedication and hard work that have brought us to this point. Indonesia has committed to adopt GCM and has been designated as the champion country for the implementation of GCM. Currently, Indonesia is drafting regulation for the National Action Plan for GCM implementation. In this action plan, Statistics Indonesia is intended to contribute to the first objective, which is collecting and disaggregating data as a basis for evidence-based policy. In this regard, in collaboration with ministries and agencies supported by IOM, ILO, and UNFPA, Statistics Indonesia is developing UN data on international migration, or SDMI. This year, SDMI focuses on building the system, establishing collaboration on data use, and preparing a blueprint as well as a roadmap. For this preliminary proposal, we have identified 14 out of 61 indicators that can be supported by this SDMI forum. The development of SDMI is indeed a long and challenging process, but we remain committed to making it reality in order to enhance migration governance in Indonesia. IOM has also conducted a national secondary data review, which assists Indonesia in identifying sources of migration data. to measure Indonesia's progress regarding international migration governance, Indonesia also measures the MGI led by MOVA. On this occasion, we would like to provide feedback for the preliminary proposal on the first objective. We see that the core indicator has included the number or proportion of international migrants in the total resident population, which means already cover foreign-born or foreign citizen in the country. Therefore, while we are in this topic, we would like to propose another indicators which captures the number of citizens abroad, as it is crucial for the evaluation of the number of out-migration. This indicator is essential for Indonesia's governments to protect its citizens, as stated in our constitutional mandate. However, we also understand that immigration data is difficult to obtain. If we may suggest a solution, what if we establish a system for data mirroring between countries, or maybe we could discuss another solution later. Then regarding the additional indicators of relevance, we suggest adding 1 point from the MGI framework, which is, does the country have an established coordination mechanism to compile and harmonize migration data collected by different government agencies? We realize that data availability and standardization are global issues regarding evidence-based policy. So we think they should be considered in the GCM indicator as well. Overall, we believe that this discussion has a lot of potential for growth and improvement in GCM implementation. We look forward to a productive and fruitful discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful to have your insights as a National Statistical Office. Of course, this is going to be something we're going to be working with you a lot to implement. So it's really important to have your insights on this. So thank you very much. And I think those points are well noted. But again, before handing over to the co-chairs, I'd like to see if there's anyone else who'd like to come in. I do see that there is actually a comment in the chat from Frederick Amoro Carol. Would you like to speak up, or please do feel free to speak up if you'd like. Okay, otherwise I see Ishani also has a hand up, so please go ahead, Ishani.
Sorry not to hog the entire discussion, just a couple of points. One, the indicator in objective 17 and in objective 7 are the same, right? So I was just wondering, when we say access to services, whether that also includes protection, education, health, like if you're covering the entire gamut, or whether somewhere we could actually specify what we mean by services, because I think that's quite important for all migrants, but especially for children, because of the issue with education and language, right? Depending on where they've moved, and this is often a barrier that we face. Thank you.
Thanks, Ishani, and no problem at all. Really helpful to have these kinds of insights. Okay, so I just read out maybe the comment in the chat, which is whether or not there can be a global minimum wage for migrants, regardless of race, ethnicity, or color, to foster objective 17. So that's there. So maybe now I hand over to Claire and Irene for their reactions. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you again for the questions. I'm going to maybe take them in reverse order this time. So from Ashani, the question on the dimensions of this domain 1 of 10.7.2, it's a composite measure of 5 subcategories that look indeed at health, education, social protection, justice, and we can provide you with the more details. The reason why it's synthesized here is simply because it's a slightly lengthy indicator to describe, but well noted that those key many of those key dimensions that you're interested in are indeed covered there. And I think to the distinguished delegate from Indonesia, thank you so much for your intervention. And I think the points on the importance of measuring the diaspora, the persons, the citizens living abroad is critical. As you pointed out, it is difficult to measure, and there are problems that we are all well aware of in terms of the different approaches. I think the idea of using triangulation and looking at what countries of destination have recorded and so forth might be helpful. But that's something we can maybe discuss more going forward. In terms of the additional suggestion of an MGI indicator on coordination of data, I think that's an excellent point. We know that coordination is a challenge. I think Keiko alluded to that also in her keynote address, in her wonderful keynote address. We know that in many cases, the data come from different ministries, and sometimes the improving that coordination, having that mechanism, formal mechanism to ensure that there's a dialogue is very critical. And I think in the context of the SDGs, there is usually one government entity that's required to facilitate all of the transmission of the data, and that is usually the NSO. But that is something perhaps going forward in the context of this indicator list as well. That's something that would need to be clarified, which would be the leading entity at the government level that would be helping to facilitate the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. If Irena, I don't know if you want to come in. Otherwise, I see that Irena, go ahead.
Maybe just at the point to address the comment in the chat on global minimum wage for migrants. So for objective 17, we have indeed the core objectives the core indicators that were shown in the slides, but we also have the additional indicators, and one of the additional indicators proposed is SDG 8.8.2, looking at labor rights, and which includes also a variety of aspects, as also Itok kindly also explained in a previous intervention. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Irena. Indeed, equal pay for work of equal value is really important in ILO standards. And I see we have Winida Alberta from Statistics Indonesia with your hand up. So please do go ahead, Ms. Alberta. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. I just only want to add a few things after my colleague has mentioned already. I noticed that some indicators are relevant to more than one objective, and there are also many indicators related to data or statistics spread across various objectives. Considering that Objective 1 focuses on collect and utilize accurate and disaggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policies, I'm wondering whether all those data-related indicators are also incorporated in Objective 1, either as core or additional indicators. As my colleague Farah mentioned, Indonesia is developing SDMI to support the implementation of GCM. So far, we acknowledge, we know that we only support for the Objective 1, but after we see this proposal that we could also at least support across 9 objective in these proposed indicators. So if we only focus on the 2 indicators, basic indicator in Objective 1, we will lose whether we need also to collect the data supporting other other objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alberta. Again, Clara Arena, would you like to come in on that?
I think you have another hand up, but I can take it maybe afterwards.
Okay, sorry, I'm not seeing another hand, but if there is someone who would like to come in, please go ahead. Sorry, I can't see anyone right now.
Sorry, I think maybe it was an old hand. So thank you for that comment. I think we're struggling with objective one, to be frank, and that's where I think your input would be very helpful in terms of understanding, is it about sort of identifying basic information that needs to be collected, or is it more qualitative information on whether the data exists or whether the coordination mechanisms are in place? And we even had a discussion internally about whether we should have a minimum sort of baseline set, which is what they have, for example, in the UN expert group meeting on migration statistics. They have some basic stock and flow data that are sort of additional, that are on the side. So these kind of issues about where to position that with regard to objective one, or should it be outside of the objectives, just generic, I think is critical. And it's something where your feedback as NSOs would be very, very helpful for us. We do not want to limit by any means the opportunity to monitor or collect data that you think are relevant for objective one. And I think it's important to underscore something that Amy mentioned in her intervention at the beginning, that this is a proposal that is going to be developed for your consideration. And it's up to you to use it in a way that's helpful to you. But if you have, and at this stage, we're trying to adjust it to make sure that it is as relevant as possible to you. But even once it's finalized, if there are aspects or dimensions that are relevant to your country or your region that you do not see reflected, this is not a binding proposal. It is something simply for your consideration and for your use. And so, of course, there will be aspects that will not be covered, and there will be issues that you might want to use alternative and additional frameworks to complement the limited set. So I think that's very important, not to give the sense that this is by any means something binding. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't try to do our very best to ensure that the proposal is sound, that it's useful, that it's something that does not create a burden, and that it is relevant for you. So I think that's something critical to underscore. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. I don't know if maybe Ms. Alberto, if you want to come back on what Claire clarified, if you have a perspective, particularly on this idea of, do we include the data indicators in this indicator framework, or do we have an additional set of baseline data that should be being gathered? Really interested in your perspective, if you'd like to give us your thoughts. Or maybe this is something we need to reflect on, and this can maybe be an input in the survey as well, of course, because this might be something that needs more reflection. Okay, I'd just like to check if there's anyone else who would like to come in on this panel. Otherwise, in the interest of time, perhaps we should move on to the last panel. Maybe we need to get the presentation back up just so people can see that last set of indicators. And sorry if you can hear any noise in the background. One of my cats is meowing loudly. Sorry about that. Okay, so for the last panel, we have objectives 14 on consular protection, objective 15 on access to basic services, objective 16 on inclusion and social cohesion, 19 on migrant and diaspora contribution, 20 on remittances, and 22 on social protection. So if we can move to the next slide, please, to have a look at the suggested indicators. So we have one core indicator for objective 14 on whether or not the government has specific measures to provide assistance to citizens residing abroad in countries in crisis or post-crisis situations. This comes from SDG 10.7.2. For objective 15, we have the proportion of population living in households with access to basic services. This is SDG 1.4.1. Objective 16, whether or not the government has a national policy or strategy to promote the inclusion or integration of immigrants. This is coming from, again, SDG 10.7.2. For objective 19, we have the two indicators on whether or not the country formally engages members of diaspora and expatriate communities in agenda setting and implementation of development policy coming from the Migration Governance Index. The second indicator is existence of a dedicated government entity or agency responsible for enacting immigration and diaspora policies, something like a Citizens Abroad agency or an overseas employment agency, again, coming from the MGI. For objective 20, this is on remittances. So we have the SDG indicator 10.C.1, remittance costs as a proportion of the amount remitted. And then we also have an MGI indicator, which is whether or not the country has programs to promote financial inclusion of migrants and their families, particularly when they are remittance senders and or receivers. And then the last indicator in this panel, and indeed the last one we're going to look at today, is whether or not the government provides non-nationals equal access to social security, regardless of immigration status, or only for those with legal immigration status, which is coming from SDG 10.7.2. So these are the suggested indicators for this set of objectives. We still do have a bit of time, so please do feel free to come in case you have any last questions or comments or ideas with regards to this set of indicators. So please do go ahead, please raise your hand, come in on the chat. Thanks to Jenna, who's having to leave, unfortunately, but thanks for your inputs. Ishani, please go ahead.
Sorry, this is just a clarification question on GCM objective 20 and the co-indicator. I'm just wondering if it's necessary for us to say, particularly when there are remittance senders and or receivers, and if we cannot just leave it as migrants and their families, just because I feel then we are getting governments to prioritize those who are send money and or receive money, and we know often, well, not often, quite a few migrants do send it, but maybe doing so through means which are not official, and it's not necessarily documented or captured in government systems or whatever it is. So just to kind of, yeah, that's more a question for clarification. Thanks.
Thanks, Ishani. Would anyone else like to come in at this stage? Not seeing any hands, not seeing anything in the chat. Maybe I can just address that question to Irina or Claire.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul and Shani, for this question and the valid point that you are raising. So this indicator, as you see it in the slide, and as proposed as core indicator, is an indicator that is already existing and that is being used by the Migration Governance Indicators program. We then decided to include it in this proposal due to its with regard to objective 20 in particular, which is looking at remittances due to its relevance for remittances. So this is why you see it here also with this specification. That being said, that my comment refers to its relevance for this objective, and then I understand that in other contexts we may want also to have a look at financial inclusion more broadly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irina. Does anyone else have any other comments they'd like to make on this set of indicators? We do still have a bit of time, so this is an opportunity to just give us your thoughts. I mean, I do want to say I think we've had already some really useful inputs, reminders of things that we've been missing, and considerations coming from national statistical offices, which I think are really important. So we yeah, we really do want to encourage as much participation as possible. So please, please do feel free to use this time for anything you'd like to add.
May I ask something?
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you that when you talk about diasporas, like with the 14, Objective 14, whether or not the government has specific measures to provide assistance to citizens residing abroad. Now, are we also including the diaspora? Many of the people are of the national origin, but are not citizens of the countries. For example, Indians residing abroad, some of them have taken citizenship of those countries. They are not anymore citizens of India, and yet they have problems, you know, there. So is that agenda included in this GCM?
Good question. I will hand that over to the co-chairs to answer.
Thank you so much for the question. So this objective is about enhancing consular protection, right? Objective 14, to assist the migrants through the migration cycle. So this particular indicator is about what happens to a migrant while they're abroad if there's a crisis situation in particular, and making sure that they're repatriated if it's a natural crisis or a political crisis, violence, something erupts in the country where they're working and they need to be quickly evacuated. But we also have an additional indicator which is included in the discussion note, which is broader, which is an MGI indicator, which looks at institutions to assist nationals residing abroad. So not just in crisis situation, and that looks at embassies and ministries and so forth. A separate objective really is objective 19, which focuses on diasporas. And I think perhaps your question is also looking at that. And when we were discussing 19, we had the privilege of having a very distinguished colleague amongst us who's a representative of civil society and expert on diasporas. And she really helped guide some of our discussions there. But we're proposing 2 core indicators from the MGI, really focusing on empowering the diaspora really, and making sure that it's engaged. And then we have 3 additional indicators that one of which I think is interesting, which is the SDG indicator 10.3.1. Which is also about feeling discriminated in the country. And I think that's also trying to capture the issue of protection of rights of the diaspora. And another MGI indicator on whether or not all citizens of the country can vote in national elections if they live in another country. But the specific issue about persons who maybe have dual citizenship, we had looked at that, I think, in the context of this objective 19, and in the end, I think it was not included. But again, there are indicators, specific indicators in particular from the MGI on that, and there is also some from the IMISEM framework, I think. So if you would like to suggest those for the consideration of the work stream through the questionnaire, that might be something really for us to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, interesting. Actually, dual citizenship, or there are some who have got no citizenship at all, neither in this country or nor in that country. So, for example, millions of Indians are there in Myanmar who migrated 100 years back, and still they have no citizenship there, and not in India also. So in that context, I asked. No problem. I will put up that in the question. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really important point. I see there is a comment from Ilana Wong. I don't know if Alana, you want to maybe speak up? Be very happy to hear from you.
Hi, Paul. Thanks so much. And thank you to the whole team for such a fantastic effort on these core indicators. Yes, I wasn't sure how to particularly phrase the comment, but I hope it made some sense. And I wanted to just ask if there could be some possibility of adding nuance or consideration to the term households, particularly around migrants in the region, thinking about many who are not particularly living in something traditionally understood as a household. So the large proportion of migrants who are migrant workers who live in the house of their employers, who are housed in dormitories, perhaps there can be some nuance of the indicator there to capture them as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alana. Again, very useful to have these regional perspectives. Yeah, maybe I'll pass that back to Claire and Irena in case, unless there's anything else. Oh, I see another message coming in. Okay, great. Rebecca is so supporting this comment. Thanks. You're muted, Irena.
Yes, thank you very much, Ilana, for this comment. It is a valid point, and we will then discuss it within the work stream going forward. I think there is also another point, another comment by Anis Sour with regard to migrants' participation. Perhaps to react quickly also to that. So for objective 19, which is specifically about diasporas, we have an indicator that is looking at the inclusion of diaspora members in an agenda setting. Then with regard to immigrants, in objective 16, which is about social inclusion, we have one additional indicator which refers at mechanism to engage civil society and the private sector in the formulation and implementation of migration policy. So we tried to capture this through indicators that could then be related to specific objectives of the Global Compact and for the two components of this participation. Then I think there are no further comments in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irena. I don't know if we have any other last thoughts. I mean, we still have a couple of minutes before we move to the closing. So I just want to give people a last opportunity to provide any inputs that they would like to anything, any last burning issues that they'd like to highlight. But if not, I would. Okay, well, I'd like to, from my side, I think this has been a really interesting and useful discussion. I think there's been some really terrific inputs and comments, which I think have given us a lot of food for thought as to how to proceed. I'd really like to thank everyone for their active engagement from member states, from stakeholders, from trade unions, from other from UN agencies. I think this has been, I think it's been really, really useful, and really looking forward to also getting your inputs on the surveys. I think there's a lot for us as a work stream, and in particular for Irena and Claire as co-chairs to think about and to integrate, and really looking forward to how we can work together on this going forward. I'd just like to maybe give a last chance to Claire and Irena for any final thoughts from their side.
Yes, well, just a couple of words to say many thanks to Paul for moderating this session so well, also on behalf of the membership, and many thanks also to all the participants from member states and the civil society organizations for all your input, for all your suggestions, for all the comments you had. These are very important for us to make sure that the proposal we are developing is relevant both at a global level, but also for each country and each region. So this is very much appreciated. And we also very much look forward to the responses that you will submit for the survey in August. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Irena. Claire?
Thank you, colleagues. I just wanted to echo Irene and Paul. Thank you for your engagement. This has been very important. And please stay engaged in the process as it moves forward, including following the global consultations. That might also be something of interest. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Claire. Well, I think this brings my role here to an end. Thanks once again for this really interesting discussion, for your thoughts and feedback. And it's a real pleasure to hand over for some closing remarks to Marina Manka, who is leading the global, the GM DAC in Berlin. And she'll have, I think, some key takeaways and some concluding remarks. So nice to see you, Marina, and happy to hand over the floor. Thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you everyone who is still with us. I understand there's really been quite an active discussion and a lot of very specific feedback has been gathered. The team indeed has been amazing, both Claire and Irena. I would like to personally thank the two colleagues who have been coordinating and putting a lot of efforts into ensuring that the content, that very highly anticipated limited list of indicators to measure progress of the compact implementation is there and is a good basis for us to continue refinement and ensuring that we are not missing most critical points. I think today there's been a lot of already information shared in terms of how we managed to get to the point of today, the process, the participatory process of formulating that indicator list, the complementarity criteria of ensuring that we are not coming up with a completely new process, but really are building on already existing frameworks and lists of indicators indeed. And it was really amazing for me to see some of the familiar faces like Paul from ILO. The ILO team is one of the 17 teams who have been engaged in the working group discussions across UN partners, but also other organizations, civil society. It is amazing to see that already Paul spoke today and other colleagues from ILO about referring to our discussions at the IMRF in Chile. Indeed, the indicators exist and they're quite good indicators. But I think moving forward, we need to make sure that this reporting, voluntary reporting of member states, which will start following the adoption of this list of indicators, or actually finalization, to be honest, if to be correct. So that will give additional impetus for us to start generating better, more disaggregated insights and understanding of migration processes, about how migrants are factoring the countries of origin and destination, what are the impacts of migrant communities. Diaspora was also referred to today in discussions. Very challenging category for us to measure. Something what I used to work before joining the Global Migration Data Analysis Center, which I manage now. So I think moving forward, let us indeed collect further comments, suggestions from everyone. We are very open towards feedback. We know that, of course, reporting will be in the hands of the member states, and the member states and the countries will have also an opportunity to provide complementary data. And that's why the nice thing about the list is that it allows us to identify core indicators, but also complementary ones. So this flexible, agile approach towards having a kind of move forward. And I think the colleagues also stressed that the process of review of the list of the indicator will continue. So if something new emerges, and we know migration is a highly dynamic process, so there will be a space for us to experiment, to innovate. Our organizations, both UNDES and IAM, are developing constantly guidelines and recommendations on how to tap into complementary data sets, such as big data, for instance, in the situation where we do not have traditional data sources, when they are maybe falling short of demonstrating and describing the processes which we are trying to describe, to ensure that the policies and responses are formulated in a way so that we are really comprehensive, we are not leaving anyone behind, and of course we are looking forward. So I thank once again everybody, the organizers, the secretariat, everybody who was with us, partners, colleagues, and wish everyone a successful rest of the day, a happy summer. Hopefully it's not too hot where you are, and stay in touch and continue providing your support and all ideas. So we'll definitely make sure to take each of it into consideration. So over, and thank you all again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.